Hello there. My name is Monica Burns, and welcome to Technology Essentials and Education. Today, I chat with Abby Bell all about using AI agents and how she's completely rethinking a traditional flipped classroom model. Abby has a lot of experience and insight in K 12 education, now in higher education. She's the director of academic operations at a university, and she shares her work with freshman students, hundreds of them, and how she's using AI agents. Now, this is a wonderful, really accessible conversation. So if you're curious about AI agents or you're like, I don't know, Monica, if that's for me, I want you to stick around because Abby shares so many great pieces of information and really makes this topic easier to wrap your head around. If you're curious, but not quite sure where to start, she has lots of great strategies. Let's get into the conversation. This episode is brought to you by Jotform. Jotform provides an all-in-one solution to streamline administrative tasks, enhance community engagement, and foster innovation. Using their no-code drag-and-drop forms and workflows, your teams can securely collect and store data, automate tasks, and collaborate on team resources. Educational institutions are also eligible for a 30% discount on Jotform Enterprise. Head to their website to learn more. Jotform.com/enterprise/education. Welcome to the podcast. I am so excited to talk with you about this topic today. But before we get into all of it, can you share a bit with listeners or viewers? What is your role in education? What does your day-to-day look like?
Sure. So, based on what I'm sharing today, I think it's important to note that I have the full spectrum of education.
Mhm.
So, I worked for 10 years in K 12 education as a teacher and then as a vice principal. And then I moved into higher education. So now I'm working at Lipscomb University and I'm pursuing my doctorate in leadership and innovation. And right now I'm working in the provost office. So I work as the director of academic operations and I teach the freshman seminar at Lipscomb. So
Well, a lot of different experiences, perspectives, I'm sure you're hearing, right, from the freshmen, right, as well
mhm.
as the students, right, and colleagues, right, that you work with now. And you've been using the Jotform ecosystem in some really creative ways. And that's what we're going to unpack together in this conversation. But first, can you walk us through how you got started with Jotform?
So how I got started was our office was in a transition between two employees.
Okay.
And so I had the privilege of doing two jobs at one time.
Mhm.
And I needed something to automate some of the processes because I didn't have enough time to do everything. And so I found Jotform then. And it was so efficient and helped so much that it just kind of evolved. And I've really started using it in some fun ways. So it makes the systems run more cleanly for me in my role in the provost office. But a couple years ago, or maybe last year, Jotform did like a promo video for a new thing they were launching, and it was
Mhm.
the AI Presenter Agents. And Lipscomb's kind of ahead, I think, of the curve with
Mhm.
AI in education. So I was like, I think I probably need to jump on that one and see what that's about. And I watched it, and they were promoting the presenter agent using an example of hotels and like, this is how you can use the presenter
Mhm.
agent for your business. And I watched it and was like, this is great for education. This is
Mhm.
going to be such an amazing tool. And so I kind of picked it up then and made my first presenter agent for our freshman seminar course. Um, and that presenter agent taught them how to build their own bot on Boodlebox. So yeah, that's kind of how it started. And
And
yeah.
then, right, just that idea of, and before I even kind of follow up there, you said a bunch of words that I think come to mind for educators who are evaluating different platforms or experiences. You said efficiency, you said automate, you said systems, right? All things that we're looking for when we're making a choice on what's worth our time, or, during the day, right? What kind of brain capital we can invest in learning something new. And you mentioned, of course, the AI presenter agent and one example of what you're doing right with your students. But for someone who hasn't seen an AI presenter agent in action, how would you describe what it does and what it looks like from even a student's perspective?
So I think the easiest way to describe a presenter agent is like it's a PowerPoint. So you simply upload a PowerPoint into Jotform, and then you give a script to an AI agent that will present the PowerPoint for you.
Mhm.
Now, one of the cool things about Jotform is that you, aside from giving it a script, you can also teach the agent to ask questions and then
Mhm.
train it on how to answer any response that might come up.
Mhm.
So it kind of looks like a presenter, like it's just a PowerPoint that students can click through and see the different slides, and there's a script that goes with it so that they're taught.
So that idea of interacting with content in a different way, right, than they might during other parts of the semester, other parts of their week, right, is pretty powerful in terms of getting content to students. And like you mentioned, having this, bot that can answer questions, not just because, but because you have, right, helped train it to make sure it's just right, for a group of students. And you piloted the Jotform AI presenter agent with over 750 freshmen. Is that number right?
Mhm.
Okay, yeah, that's
Yep.
a lot, right? So, what was that experience like, and what surprised you most about watching an AI agent deliver and adapt instruction in real
Mhm.
time?
So I loved using the agent because one of the things I really like, we're going to talk about flipped classrooms in a minute, but I'm
Yeah,
just going to a
yeah,
tiny
please.
bit
Uh huh.
introduce it
Yeah.
now. So typically in a flipped classroom, maybe a professor will just do a one shot film of themselves teaching something.
Hmm.
So they'll do like, okay, here I'm going to teach this on the whiteboard. They cut it off, they send it to the student, which is great. Like, this is in theory a great idea. But when I was a principal, one of the things that always drove me crazy when I would do teacher evaluations is that I want to see the students interacting with the professor during the lecture piece.
Yeah. Hmm.
And in a video, you can't do that,
Hmm.
but you can with the prisoner agent. So when the one of the cool things about the Jotform presenter agent is that you can see the conversations that the students are having with the agent. So you can see where they needed more information, where they're asking questions, where there was some confusion. You can see which slides they watched over and over again
Hmm.
to kind of understand, oh, I don't know how to do that. So it'll show you on the conversations page, user return to slide 5, user return to slide 5.
Hmm.
So you can kind of see where the student was struggling, where they needed to review the content multiple times before they understood how to do what you had asked them to do. So that is, and I think that really helps take, like, that engages the student. Those
Hmm.
checks for knowledge are just so important and really make this tool so helpful over just a traditional video that you would post
Yeah.
on online.
And it's so interesting. You just used the word traditional, and I was thinking like that idea of a traditional flipped classroom sounds so funny when we think about how it's not like a concept that's been around for a very long time. But when we think about how it was traditionally used and is, right, still in some environments, it is maybe that whiteboard recording, maybe someone narrating a PowerPoint slide, right? But to have that extra level of interactivity and not just I'll see you tomorrow and we'll talk about this, right?
Mhm.
But I can now say, before we do come together, everyone went back to slide 5, like you said. Like, what does that tell me, right, about my delivery, perhaps? What does that
Mhm.
tell me about the content? Like, we need to linger there a little bit more, right? What does that mean for what we're going to do moving forward? So, just that level of formative assessment data that you're gathering, the ability to take action on that information. And, for students who in a traditional, right, flipped classroom environment might have watched a video and not been sure what their next step was or where to go for help, or maybe now they're Googling something to find an answer and they're not getting a great source, right, or that's only making them more confused, right? This is so much more of a guided experience, which I think
Mhm.
is so interesting. And you alluded to, right, that flipped classroom model, and building a flipped classroom model around this. What does that structure look like for you all?
Okay. I love flipped classrooms anyway for so many reasons. But the first and most important reason I like a flipped classroom is because I really think it reprioritizes Bloom's taxonomy in
Hmm.
the classroom. And so traditionally, when you're doing a lecture, you're really focused on those bottom quadrants of the Bloom's taxonomy pyramid, right? So you're looking at remembering and understanding, and you're not getting into the applied learning or the
Hmm.
analyzing or the evaluating or creating. And those are really the pieces. That top of the pyramid, that higher order thinking, is really where the students need you to help them.
Yeah.
So when I flip the classroom and I have the presenter agent is the homework now. So what
Hmm.
used to be the lecture in the classroom is now the homework piece. So my students are watching my lecture via Jotform agent and interacting with the agent. So like they have to say their name at the
Okay.
front of the presenter
Yeah.
agent will say,
Hmm.
"Who am I talking to today?" And then that is what I grade for their homework assignment, that they have interacted with the agent, that they have had a conversation with the agent. And it's just them answering questions. Maybe there's a
Yeah.
reflection question, or maybe a check for knowledge as we go through it. But then in the classroom, I'm actually doing what they would traditionally do as homework. So the projects are being done in class.
Hmm.
The One of the things that I'm really concerned about in this age is that students are not reading.
Right. Uh-huh.
And I teach freshmen, and a lot of freshmen don't know how to read at a college level.
Hmm.
So, like, teaching them how to read and notate is something I'm doing in the classroom.
Yeah.
So,
Hmm.
I kind of teach in the classroom like I used to teach in a kindergarten class. I have
Hmm.
centers. They have a reading center, they have a writing center, they
Hmm.
come be with the teacher center. They have a group work center. So that's kind of what it looks like for me, is that I've kind of all those things they used to do out of class, they're doing in the classroom.
A quick note from the presenter of today's episode, Jotform. Jotform lets you build a form in minutes. Student survey forms, homework submission forms, online quizzes, and so much more. You can start from scratch, or if you want to get a head start, check out their collection of free form templates designed with teachers, schools, and districts in mind. Learn more about Jotform and how educational institutions can get 30% discount on Jotform Enterprise. Head to their website to learn more. Jotform.com/enterprise/education. And just the layers there. And I'm so glad you explained it in that way, because I think it would help someone envision, right, what that experience is like both on their own and then when they are physically present in an environment. And to honor, right, that more traditional flipped classroom model, right, you are doing all of those things with these additional layers on top that are addressing, right, some of the maybe newer challenges, like you
Yeah.
mentioned, critical thinking as a reader, right, reading comprehension skills in general, right, having time dedicated for students to work through activities. And I love that, center rotation model that, yeah, right, we might know, right? I'm a former elementary school teacher, right, as well, right? But as someone who does professional development, like that's often sometimes, right, the right model for a group, right? We're moving through activities, maybe physically even moving through centers, within a space. So I love that there's that AI component, right, with their learning experience, as they're, working through a lecture. But then you're also kind of addressing some of the things that people may be concerned about, right, with AI use for students by having everyone together, right, supporting them as readers, supporting them, right, during collaborative moments where they may be kind of offline, in some of those moments too. So, as you think about these different use cases for, Jotforms, not just the AI presenter agent, but also Jotform AI assistant, right? I know you built one that helps students with scheduling and logistics. How has that changed the way you spend your face-to-face time with students?
Well, so I do have like a teaching assistant
Hmm.
agent who will answer questions about the syllabus,
Yeah.
who will, if a student's confused about something, they can schedule an appointment with me, or the chat feature will alert me if
Hmm.
it doesn't know how to answer a specific question from a student. So if I'm
Yeah.
available, I can just jump in and chat with the student myself.
Hmm.
Um, which I think is great. That's
Oh,
a
yeah.
great tool. It puts me at the fingertips of my students so they
Hmm.
can access me
Yeah.
anytime they need, in theory.
And just that
Or
first pass, even, right, of an
yeah,
interaction to go through that extra channel.
yeah. And then I tend to use Jotform for just like initial intake information.
Hmm.
So like tell me about yourself and that sort of thing. But I also do check-ins with the students. So like especially that first time you have a student their freshman year, retention is such a big deal
Hmm.
because they are babies and they don't know what they don't know yet. And
Hmm.
so I think it's so valuable to send them, I just send them a job form and I'm like, hey, here's like a touch point. Like,
Yeah.
how are you doing? What's going on in your life? What
Mhm.
are you proud of? What's stressing you out right now? And then that also gives me something if they're stressed about a biology
Right.
exam, I can be like, hey, I know a bunch of you are worried about an upcoming midterm. Here's a resource that you might
Yeah.
not know you have available. So that's another way that I've just been utilizing the platform to make my class better.
Yeah. And especially, like you said, for that group where they might not, they're navigating so much, right? As a freshman, they might not know exactly when to ask for help or what's okay to share or who their people are, right? To check in and get support. So even having that kind of automation to say every, 6 weeks or every 2 weeks or whatever the cadence might be for a program, right? I am giving this space for someone to share, right, this information with me, and then you of course have it organized, have trends that you can take a look at, right? There's so much that you can do to gather actionable information, right, with the
Mhm.
platform. So as we think more generally perhaps about AI in education, specifically in higher education, in our conversation today, when you think about where AI in higher education is headed over the next few years, what excites you the most, and what do you think we should be paying close attention to?
Well, what excites me the most, for sure, as a former vice principal
Mhm.
and seeing the classroom is I really think AI is forcing us as educators to really do higher order thinking in our classrooms.
Mhm.
Like we can't just introduce things and have and test for knowledge anymore. Like this really levels up what we have to do as educators.
Yeah.
So I think that is awesome
Mhm.
and slightly terrifying
Yeah.
because it means
Right.
like a lot of the ways we've traditionally worked, we can't do anymore.
Mhm.
And in some ways, like the cheating culture that is coming out of AI is
Mhm.
really making us go back to the basics. And it's one of the reasons why I have flipped my classroom because I need to know when my students are doing the work themselves and when they're having AI do it. And if they're not doing it in the classroom, then it's harder for me to know when they have used AI to write or when they've used AI to skim through a paper.
Yeah. And we had Michael Hernandez on the podcast earlier this year, and he uses the term uncheatable assessments, right? And that idea that you really have to push the critical thinking aspect, like you mentioned, because right, there's no way to put that aside, right? That's more important than ever. It's really, necessary. And I really appreciate too your framing to say like awesome and terrifying. Like so much of the work I do with educators, even just talking about automation of tasks or gathering of ideas, right, or having this, collaborator to go to if you don't have a community. you're asking for support from, it's okay to hold on to a couple different feelings at the same time as we navigate these
Mhm.
spaces. And if anything, right, it's important, right? It's crucial that we do, right, so that we are, prioritizing the things that are most important, like the critical thinking component, that you mentioned. And, for someone listening today who might have come to this conversation not quite sure what an AI agent really was. Maybe they've never heard that term. Maybe they've heard it, but are now just starting to wrap their head around it. For an educator who's listening who's curious about using AI agents themselves, but isn't sure where to start, what advice would you give them for taking a first step?
I really think when you're doing your first agent, my best piece of advice is to keep it simple.
Mhm.
So, agents can be slippery if you don't know how to make them.
Mhm.
And what I mean by that is like the more complicated you try to make an agent, the more information you try to give, the less likely it is to give the responses that you want it to
Mhm.
give. You
Yeah.
can give it too much information. So I really recommend like minimizing and making, like, if you're starting, like just a syllabus agent. So the
Mhm.
agent knows how to do just your syllabus
Yeah.
and just get in contact with you.
Mhm.
Or like the presenter agent is great because you're just teaching one lesson. So you're not teaching the whole course content. You're doing one lesson with specific knowledge related to that one lesson.
Mhm.
So, and I think for anybody who's starting out, like that is my best piece of advice. Like there's ways of stacking agents and making
Yes.
this more
Mhm.
complicated. But I think if you're just starting out, my best piece of advice is to just keep it simple.
And those are great examples. And I'm glad that you mentioned the stacking agents piece because I think people hear, right, AI agents and they hear these stories of agents that maybe are interacting with each other, right, or building upon one another in terms of the tasks they do. That doesn't have to be, where you head or even where you end up, right? You start simple, right? You have that one clear thing, right? And the examples you gave with the syllabus, with a certain presentation, and that's really where you make sure you're laser focused so that your output is highest quality, right, as possible, and really connects back to your intention and your goal, which is crucial, right? As someone is exploring this, like, what's your why, right? And you've shared so many great whys, right, for creating an AI agent or several, right, over the course of the semester. So, Abby, where can people connect with you? Where can they learn more about your work and kind of stay up to date with what you're working on?
Well, I think the best place is my LinkedIn page.
Mhm.
So you're welcome to go there. I do have a Substack and a website.
Mhm.
So they're welcome to connect with me on either of those as well. But those are linked in my LinkedIn page.
Perfect. And we'll make sure, right, to give that shout out, follow Abby Bell, right, on LinkedIn, and find her Substack. I know that I'm going to add myself to the list as soon as we finish up today. So thank you so much, Abby, for your time, your energy, your enthusiasm, and your really actionable ideas for listeners today.
You're very welcome. Such a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Abby Bell had so many wonderful things to share in this conversation. My wheels are spinning about using AI agents in my work. And although I'm sure you've already clocked a few takeaways, I want to wrap this up like I always do with a few ways to put these ideas into action. First, use AI presenter agents to deliver interactive lectures that students can pause, rewind, and engage with on their own time. Flip your classroom so class time is spent on higher order thinking activities like projects, reading, and collaboration. Review conversation logs from AI agents and see where students are struggling and adjust instruction accordingly. And finally, start simple when building your first AI agent by focusing on one lesson or one task, like a syllabus assistant. Make sure to follow Abby on LinkedIn. You heard her share so many great pieces of information. Really a wonderful resource if you're exploring AI agents. A big thank you to Jotform, the presenter of today's episode. To learn more about Jotform and how educational institutions can get a 30% discount on Jotform Enterprise, head to jotform.com/enterprise/education.